framework. And of course, we have money also. World Bank has also assisted us a lot. So it's great to have this panel discussion. And I requested RMI to have this panel discussion for wider dissemination of the information that we have today on what is our expectation on the evolving market for battery storage in India. So just to give the background, of course, I feel, and that's the thought process in the management at NITI also, that battery storage is an inevitable disruption, is getting an inevitable disruption today in the world of energy. And the world, and especially India, is also poised to transition into the next wave of energy and harnessing greater share of renewable RE into our grid. Now, with this thought process, the entire framework of the battery storage program has now been drafted. The bid documents are out. The government has already approved, as Clay was also pointing, the first tranche of this entire subsidy package. Now, the differentiator is in the battery storage, it's just a first tranche, which the government has approved for 5 years. It's a 10-year program. So the balance of the money will be released in a tranche-wise manner as and when required. And this is a PLI scheme. So the subsidy is being given linked to actual output and sales. So the risk of the market selling the end product is actually on the potential investor, though all the other, most of the risk pertaining to commissioning of the project, to hand-holding to the investor to get to obtain all the clearances, and subsidizing the production have been taken care through the sovereign agreement which will be entered into by the Government of India. So with this, I would, before we proceed with the further panel discussion, I would like to just highlight that now with this program coming into implementation, which constitutes getting the value addition into the Indian market for battery storage, I feel the point of inflection of the exponential growth for battery demand in India is very close. The reason I feel is the government under this program is giving up to 20% of subsidy linked to the end battery price. Now, subsidizing the end battery price in the market will immensely help the potential investors to even penetrate the already established substitute markets of ICE vehicles, of lead acid battery, of RE, getting the effective cost of firm power from RE down, so on and so forth. So that is the thought process. Yeah, thank you.
That's terrific, Aman. Thanks for sharing. I should have mentioned also before we go to presentation that we will reserve time at the end for discussion and question and answer. Yeah. So as your moderator, 2 requests there to all participants this morning. 1, feel free to log questions or comments in the chat box in the lower right-hand side of your Zoom screen. I'll be monitoring those and fielding questions. And also when we reach the end of the panel discussion, we'll actually open it up to questions, at which point you can also use the raise hand feature, which you'll also find if you click on the participants list at the base, then on the right-hand side of the screen. So we'll be fielding questions both ways. Aman, thanks for this opening set of remarks and orientation to the program. We're going to turn now to a presentation from 2 of my colleagues, Dr. Garrett Fitzgerald and Mr. Jagabanta Ningthujan, to give a little bit of a global and Indian perspective on the state of the market. So Garrett, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Clay. And yeah, what I'd like to do is maybe spend a little bit under 5 minutes providing a little bit of the context behind what Aman was alluding to, in that we are very close to this global tipping point where the energy storage market is expected to grow rapidly. And what we're seeing is really batteries are having their moment globally. and that's largely driven in the past few years by the growth of electric vehicles. And in the coming years, electric vehicles are really at that tipping point in terms of going from a niche or a nascent market to really dominating the mobility space in the mobility transformation that we're actively watching. And so one thing that we can look to understand what is driving this is over the past several years, it's largely been driven by adoption of electric vehicles in China. China remains the world's largest EV market with over 2.5 million EVs in operation today. But there are a number of countries catching up with 1 million EVs in the US and a little over 1.5 million in Europe. And so what we're seeing is, while China is kind of primed the market, the rest of the world is really eager to follow suit. And that's emphasized by a number of major announcements that have been made to tighten restrictions on efficiency measures, but even going so far as banning the sale of petrol vehicles. I think there's maybe 7 or 8 countries that have announced a future ban on petrol, and a number of them have tightened up that time frame. And while you look at the chart on the left, we're seeing the global battery demand by application as it stands today in 2020 and what it's expected to look like in 2030. And you can see that passenger EVs are making up the majority of that demand. But it's important to remember that while electric vehicles are going to be the dominating driver of battery demand, there's a spillover effect from the electric vehicle market to other markets, such as stationary. And so what we've seen is, over the past 10 years, a 90% reduction in advanced chemistry cell batteries, which has really enabled a number of new applications to be cost competitive. Nearly 60% of existing grid-tied stationary batteries utilize the same chemistry as those found in electric vehicles, and we expect this trend to continue for some time. So in addition to these major strides in performance and falling battery prices, there's advances in digital technologies such as artificial intelligence, blockchain, predictive analytics, that are all spurring new and innovative stationary storage businesses. And so the chart on the right is showing the annual global investment in stationary storage, and you can see that it's doubled from 5 to 10 billion in the past 2 years and is expected to reach $30 billion annually by 2030. And when I put together this presentation and put together this chart, I was really taken aback. If you look at what's happening globally, just the story is pretty simple. In the past 2 years, when the rest of the world was talking about how to start manufacturing supply domestically for lithium-ion batteries, China quadrupled their own capacity from 100 gigawatt hours to 400 gigawatt hours, and they currently represent 80% of global manufacturing capacity. And what's even striking further is the number of plants announced to be operational by 2024 is going to result in a quadrupling of global capacity, still with China dominating at 70%. And so while we will see a little bit of diversification in global supply, China is likely to have a pretty strong role there. And so you can see the carve out of 50 gigawatt hours in red that would represent the subsidies program size. For me, it instills confidence that there is and will be a very strong market for energy storage in India. And the last slide I wanted to talk about is really driving home the point of how this tipping point with electric mobility globally and in India prevents a need and an opportunity to solidify that domestic supply. If you look at the net imports of lithium-ion batteries in the past year in India, it was over $1 billion. And as we enter in this transition from petrol to electric vehicles, that number could get much, much larger. But the opportunity exists to ramp up domestic supply. And the table on the left really just shows how large some of these plants are expected to be. The top 3 plants are nearly 50 gigawatt hours capacity, with one reaching almost nearly 80. So the global aspiration is high, and the opportunity for India to participate is also very high. And with that, I'm gonna pass it off to my colleague Jag to focus on the specific outlook in India. And Jag, just let me know when you'd like the slides forwarded.
Thank you, Garrett. So yeah, I think Garrett, thank you, Garrett, for laying out the global context. And while we definitely acknowledge that the world is at an inflection point, both in terms of EV as well as stationary storage, we also have to acknowledge that the EV penetration story in India is also comparatively unique and driven largely by, as we have seen, by two-wheelers and e-rickshaws currently. So the way we have went about modeling and doing the supply-demand analysis was to use a scenario approach where we envision on one side EV uptake and battery demand stemming from large incentives and encouragement across the stakeholder groups, and on more conservative demand scenarios guided more by organic development. Regardless, the macro story stands that the demand growth in India is going to be substantial. But specific to EV, we definitely are looking at a large uptake in the two-wheelers and e-rickshaws, but increasing demand is going to be driven by urban goods movement for last mile delivery, as we're seeing. We are also potentially seeing the emergence of commercial electric cars as towards the long term, as companies and institutions commit to reducing their emissions. And as STUs get their act together and there is clarity on the procurement models, we believe that the electric bus market could be a very apt market for electrification, driven a lot by policy as well. So all these are, of course, riding on the success of the different EV policies, central incentive schemes like FAME 2, etc. So that's essentially how we see EV sales penetration going by 2030 of almost 35%, even in the conservative scenario. Moving ahead, Garrett. Yeah, so the story in stationary storage, I guess, as Garrett has alluded, is that the price drop in batteries is ultimately going to make a lot of use cases attractive. While, of course, the primary use case to imagine is that of renewable penetration and renewable integration. Even there, the conservative CEA estimates almost 34 gigawatt, 136 gigawatt of energy storage by 2030 if India goes about successful installation of 450 gigawatt of solar and wind by that period. But the point that the slide I would like to drive in this slide is that the use case for energy storage is beyond renewable penetration, and energy storage is providing up to 17 different services at all levels of electricity system, from utilities to grid operation to end-use consumers to off-grid behind-the-meter off-grid applications, all of which have different degree of attractiveness now and going forward. For example, for T&D, I think it's a big, decently high opportunity areas is on T&D deferral, especially distribution and deferral in India's case, as infrastructure needs grows with time, with limited capacity from the distribution company's side. There could be opportunities around resource adequacy, forward capacities, especially for short-term system peak, especially as you go towards rural areas and agricultural areas. And then on the grid side, of course, you have your RE firming from daily to seasonal integration, but you also have use cases around frequency regulation, spinning reserves, etc. And of course, on the consumer end, you potentially could see there is a definite market emerging on power backups. And as EV penetration goes, of course, aspects around EV charging and load flattening emerges. Solar plus storage and DER as self-consumption. So those are various use cases emerging. But the point, the second point I would like to drive is that market needs to evolve to adequately compensate for these services in India, which India currently lacks. So getting those act together, developing an ancillary services market, etc., are going to be crucial in energy storage systems being able to monetize and get compensated for some of these services that we believe that could be ideal and useful in the context of India. So next slide, please. Yeah. Yeah. So what does all of this means when it comes to how we see the market evolving? Just to give a context is that even currently almost 60% of battery demand is driven by EV. So it is not hard to imagine that that is going to be the case in India going forward 10 years. Where there's no reason why that EV is not going to drive demand, regardless of whether we're looking at a conservative or accelerated scenarios. Stationary storage market, even if some of the system and market challenges remain, will emerge at least in the off-grid spaces in T&D deferral, etc. So we don't see why markets are not going to emerge effectively in India. Just to give the figure on the slides, is by 2030, even in the conservative scenario, we are seeing an annual demand of almost 90 gigawatt hour, way above the 50 gigawatt hour that the program outlays. So if you go in an accelerated case where we imagine policy incentives and stakeholder cooperation emerging, you could see a fairly high upside on the demand outlook. So yeah, so that's the short optimistic take on both the conservative and accelerated outlook. Over the next slide, please. Yeah. The short story here is, without going too much into detail, is that there has been successful incentive schemes both for EVs and increasingly emerging for stationary storage around the world. And the growth, the success of China, of Norway, is a testament to it, of the United States as well. So we don't see why that India cannot measure up to some of these success stories. Certainly acknowledge that the market in India is different. The consumer's ability to pay is different, but there is definitely room for encouraging investments and incentives in demand creation in India. We do observe that battery storage, there is a lot of potential for encouragement of battery storage systems, even when we do a case comparison around the globe as well. Next slide. Yeah. So just to conclude, before we pass over to the panel, and I think I'm going to probably tease a lot of what the panelists are going to be discussing, a set of quick recommendations, and certainly it's not exhaustive, but of course, firstly focusing on like some aspects of soft loan facility to state discom transco, some sort of fiscal incentive for solar storage, microgrids, off-grid applications, backup applications, some degree of some way to establish a firm bid trajectory for renewable and battery storage tenders to give certainty to the markets for bigger investments, supporting the replacement of diesel gensets, and this is a big near-term opportunity with battery and renewable, and of course market demand aggregation for solar pumps and small-scale solar projects. And lastly, as I hinted in my slide, around regulatory frameworks, market development to compensate for stationary storage applications. On the EV side, establishing a firm national target and vision by 2030, facilitating demand aggregation of e-buses, e-cabs, and e-autos, developing a framework to support electrification of locomotives and other applications associated with railways, standardization of charging and battery swapping, and encouragement in general, policies to promote deployment of charging infrastructure, and implementation of minimum requirement for EV charging infrastructure in building codes for new construction. So with this, I think I'm teasing enough for the panelists to follow suit. Yeah.
Terrific. Thank you, Jagabanta. Thank you, Garrett. I'm excited now to share that we're going to be transitioning to the panel, where we are joined, for those who have just joined us a little bit late, by Mr. Aman Hans, who's a public-private specialist at Niti Aayog, Ms. Mani Khurana, who's a senior energy specialist with the World Bank Group, and Ms. Akshima Gate, who's a principal and program lead with Rocky Mountain Institute, India. So to start with, I'd like to come to you, Aman. And you're one of the lead champions and certainly one of the lead architects of the program, the Production Linked Incentive Program for Advanced Chemistry Cell Batteries. Can you, at a high level, or actually in any depth that you care to, share the motivation behind the program from Government of India, and also explain the structure of the program?
Yeah, thank you, Clay. So I think the main intention or the driving factor of announcing this program by the government has been increasing the penetration of renewable energy and clean energy at the ground level. And one of the biggest bottlenecks for that has been energy storage, and be it clean mobility, be it increasing the proportion of RE at the grid level. So for everything, the basic building block has been the high cost of battery storage, and taking the clues from the global market, how they're evolving, the battery prices coming down. Obviously, we never wanted to, the government never wants to repeat the oil story, that making the country dependent on the way we've been oil importing countries. That story shouldn't be repeated. Hence, this program was announced, the National Program on Advanced Chemistry Cell, by the National Mission for Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage, which is nothing but a platform where all the concerned line ministries have come together to have a coherent policy framework for the entire nation on clean energy and transformative mobility and battery storage. Now from there, 2019 March, it was the starting point, and now we are in December 2020. The government has announced this PLI scheme, and the bid documents are out for stakeholder consultation. First quarter 2021, we expect the final bid documents to be rolled out and the global bids to be invited. As I said before also, this is an output linked subsidy where the potential investors are expected to come, make the requisite investment in India, in manufacturing, set up the global supply chains out here, and avail the subsidy on, once the manufacturing is done, once the requisite performance parameters of the cell, which are defined in terms of energy density and cycle life, are met, and once the requisite threshold of domestic value addition is also achieved, the government shall roll out subsidies on the output. The final point is it is contingent on sales to the third party. And that is where the overall confidence to the potential investor on the demand creation is really required. So I personally feel once this 20% subsidy is at the cell level is a very very lucrative, very significant number in order to address the domestic deficiencies of Indian market on account of infrastructure bottlenecks, on account of lack of supply chains, and that will enable India to become a global supply export house also for battery storage in the future. Yeah.
That's great. Thanks for sharing, Aman. So I'd now like to come to Ms. Mani Khurana, Senior Specialist Energy at the World Bank Group. And Mani, I know that the World Bank has a major program to support energy storage projects in India. I know that stationary storage is of particular interest. Can you share with us some of the details of the program, where we might see some of the first investments, and what the bank's hopes and intentions are behind the program?
Thank you so much. And thank you for inviting me for this panel. It's lovely to hear about battery storage. We truly believe it's the next big thing and it's on its way. So just taking on from where Aman left off, from the National Mission on Transformative Mobility and Battery Storage, when it was announced, Niti Aayog and World Bank met, and basically Niti Aayog expressed interest to get World Bank line of credit for battery storage. See, what Aman just laid out was the mission was there, the PLI scheme is finally out, so we have a supply side. But there's a demand side. There are enough studies, and we've quoted enough numbers today as well, which shows very clearly there's a huge demand for battery storage. In the next 10 years, we see it going places. But the question is, where is that demand? And where in the stationary storage space is it? Are we talking about commercial and industrials? Are we talking about the transmission, the distribution companies? If distribution companies, which state? So what we did was there was a request for a $1 billion financing, which would basically be a concessional line of credit for battery storage. But the idea was to take it in tranches to figure out what the market really needs. So before doing a tranche of $250 million, what we did was we started with a technical assistance of $1 million, which basically was to do the studies which would inform our project going forward. And in that studies, the first study that we did was for the ISTS level. So basically mapping out the India transmission lines and figuring out what kind of generation is coming forward, what kind of transmission flows are happening thanks to the renewable energy which is increasing, and where is there a need for energy storage. At that level, we started with energy storage and said, okay, if there's a need for energy storage, would it be battery storage or pump storage? What would make more sense? Because, the planning has to be done for India, taking into account all the different technologies which are available. So that is the one study, and we are still awaiting the results, but the initial results are very promising. Obviously, there's huge curtailment which needs to be met, and therefore the numbers are looking good for storage. The second study was more on the state level, where we picked up 4 states, Tamil Nadu, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, and West Bengal. And we said, okay, for the next 10 years, this is the transmission network that they have. And these are the new generation plants which are coming up. Now, running this system, we wanted to see what was the need for battery storage and where in that state would it be sited. Would it be at the distribution level or would it be at the transmission level? What kind of use cases would be there, and how can they be monetized? The minute you talk about monetizing use cases, the policy and regulatory framework comes into the picture. We all know that we are still awaiting for the ancillary market, to be deep-rooted in the Indian system. So what we are basically looking at is saying that, okay, how will you monetize it once the market opens up? And right now, what are the different reasons? One thing which is coming very clearly is if you try to see the deviation settlement mechanism and how much a few distribution companies are paying for that. So battery storage would actually become a winner right now as well for a few states who are making a lot of investment, as in paying a lot of penalty for DSM. So these are the 2 studies that we are doing on the power system. We are also working on the e-mobility space, where we basically, again, have 2 studies, where we would be looking at 4 states, Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, MP, and Kerala, and study how can they take on their EV journey. Because again, we've been hearing about EVs, but we haven't had a focused approach by the state. Where should the charging infrastructure come up? Should they focus on 2-wheelers, 3-wheelers first, or the buses? And how should it happen? So we are working in 4 states and looking at their bidding models, model documents, and seeing how that should be bid. So overall, all these things are coming as a part of informing our project, which would be a $250 million line of credit for battery storage. And it will be technology agnostic, like the Niti Aayog program. It would also not be restricted to only transmission distribution. It could be taken by, if the aggregator comes, like in the solar rooftop model, and they decide to aggregate for commercial industrial buildings and take away the DG sets and put in the battery storage, that is also welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Mani. Fascinating and key enabling role clearly being played by you and your colleagues at the bank. So now I'd like to turn to my colleague, also my partner in leading RMI's India program, Misakshi Magate. And from what we just heard from Aman and from Mani, it's clear that demand will be a key enabler, an element of success for India's energy storage ambition, both within the PLI scheme and more broadly. Can you share a little bit on what is being done and what more must be done to ensure that we reach sufficient levels of demand to justify this scale of investment and an incentive?
Thanks, Clay. Again, I will pick where Mani left, which was on the focused approach by states. And I think that's something I want to highlight as something going forward we need to pick up aggressively. Having said that, just if we look back last 2 years, I think significant work has been done by central government to put electric vehicles at the center stage of policy as far as India's clean mobility transition and India's clean mobility vision for future is concerned. What we have seen an aggressive increase in public commitment, commitment by the central government in terms of incentive availability. Just to highlight FAME 1, we were just talking about 800 crores of public money on the table to give out for demand insurance in the form of incentives. We have increased that 10x, and now we have a 10,000 crore scheme over the last, implemented over the last 1.5 years. And it's a clear signal, a clear commitment from the government of, demand assurity to the industry and to the consumers. What has happened is that because of that political will, commitment at the central government level to keep EVs as a key focus area over the last 2 years, despite a lot of challenges, a lot of opposition in terms of how the mobility trajectory should be moving forward, it has led to a lot of reforms and initiatives by the line ministries, like Ministry of Road Transport and Highways has instituted, a lot of us know, a lot of regulatory reforms which are enabling adoption of EVs much more easier. They're making, in a way, there are lots of non-fiscal incentives now also beyond the fiscal incentives, which are making EVs a very, very attractive and strong proposition for both, individual private consumers and business consumers. We've also seen power sector reforms. We've seen initiatives from Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. So I would say that a lot has happened from the central government level. We've also seen some amount of action at the state government level. As of now, we have 10 state governments which have strong electric vehicle policies. About 6 states are preparing their policies, and we expect lots more, states to, come up with that. Just to share, RMI and NITI recently launched something called a State EV Policy Accelerator, which is aimed towards driving that action at the state government level. Because what we strongly believe is that now a lot of work that central government could have done on the demand and supply side has been done over the last 1.5 years. It's very important for the states to pick up, cities to pick up, and have more action, whether it is in terms of fiscal or non-fiscal incentives. So I think in the next 1 year or 1.5 years, we'll see a lot of action, a lot of support to state governments to drive the agenda of electric vehicles. That's something, just to clear answer, to your question, what's happening at the central and state government level. But I think one point that I want to highlight is that what we've seen is that 60 to 70% of the demand for battery storage coming from electric vehicles. And I think that is critical to, note that demand will occur. It will come only if we were to increase significantly a number of electric vehicles. Today, we are just talking about thousands of electric vehicles. What we need to move towards is millions of electric vehicles. I think that's very, very important, that how do we move our trajectory from thousands to millions? There will be an inflection point 2025, 2024, when a lot of segments will be at cost parity. And that's when the growth, starts taking place. But what is critical is the short term, the next 2-3 years, when we have to ensure the momentum, we have to ensure the deployment and ensure that all the targets that we have laid down, whether it is under FAME 2 or under many other schemes of state government and city governments, they are really, put in action and are successful, because that's what would lead us to the 2025 point where we can really see a mass scale adoption of electric vehicles across the country. So just to summarize, I feel it's very important for us to drive success of some of the critical schemes that have come up over the last 1 to 2 years.
Terrific. Thank you, Akshama. So we've got some good questions coming in the chat box. Before we turn to those, I just want to give an opportunity for Aman, Mani, Akshama. Do you want to respond to anything you heard from your fellow panelists in their opening remarks here?
Yeah, so I think I've been well versed with all these topics which we are discussing here. And obviously, a lot of work is going into pushing of the overall demand in the market. As Akshama pointed, the EV, state EV accelerator is something which NITI is working on. The FAME scheme is already out. We are also now starting to work with the state governments for faster adoption of electric buses. And charging infrastructure is something which I feel is equally important. World Bank, stationary storage. Once this line of credit is established with one of the financial institutions in India, I think that the soft loan which will be given, the blended financing which will be given, extended to the market, shall actually facilitate financing of these projects, because that is something which is lacking. The appraisal capacity at the financial level, and the risk ability of the financial institutions is also lacking, and which has been one of the biggest bottlenecks for pushing EV and stationary storage in India. So with all the entire with NITI, with RMI and World Bank working towards the facilitating the entire ecosystem, I think very soon. And now with this program also subsidizing the price of the cell up to 20% level, I think, as we are saying, the inflection point in Indian market is very close.
Thanks so much. Mani, similar question to you. If we look at, from your perspective, what's needed for demand in order to support the success of multiple programs here, what do you see as 1 or 2 key enablers to ensure that the demand for energy storage technology exists in the near term in India?
So one critical element is the financing at low cost. So any new technology which comes in, obviously the bankers, put the risk higher, and therefore the interest rate is higher. So somehow getting it into managing and facilitating. We saw it in our other project, that once we actually make the concessional or the soft loan available for new technologies, very soon the market picks up and the money starts flowing from all the different things. It's all about proving the technology and taking it. So I think one is if you can accelerate the market through financing. Second, I think is, as I mentioned earlier, is the regulatory aspect. Unless we give clarity as to how to monetize the battery, and this I'm talking mainly due to stationary storage. EVs, it's simple. You sell the car, the battery's in it, it's simple. But when it comes to stationary storage, what we've seen till now are 2-3 pilots. That's about it. We haven't seen it pick up the way we would expect it to pick up. And that's basically because of the regulatory clarity. And how do you monetize each and every benefit? Because battery is nothing but stacking of benefits. And if you can monetize each of those benefits, you will have a winner on your hands.
Very true.
That's great. Well said. So I want to turn now to some questions and discussion, opening it up to all participants. And two ways to field questions, just as a reminder. Feel free to raise your hand in the Zoom function, and also feel free to put questions into the chat box. And I think I'll start, interestingly, two similar questions came in back to back about the cost and the comparative cost of batteries in India relative to China. So one question was, what is the differential cost benefit we're expecting in manufacturing in India versus China? And I will say that's a difficult question to answer, just given the, in some cases, lack of transparency that we see in the Chinese market. And yet it's an important one when we start to look at batteries in some ways as a global commodity. So I know that the intention and the motivation behind this program in particular is to produce cost competitive batteries that can compete both in the Indian market and in export markets. But Aman, I turn it over to you. Actually, let me just build on that, because another question came, which I think is related. There's a question about a trade-off between an oil import dependency and a raw material for battery dependency. And so if you could comment, or if any of the panelists want to comment on both kind of relative costs to manufacturers in other markets, and also import dependency as it relates to either crude oil or raw materials for batteries. Aman, maybe you can kick us off.
Yeah. So very pertinent question from crude oil import to raw material import dependency. That's why, as I highlighted before, the emphasis of this program is on greater value addition in India. And secondly, the point to reckon is that the said program is also technology agnostic. Now, based on these two parameters, criteria which the government has laid down, it's up to the market to choose the technology. There are about 15 chemistries that fit into the eligibility matrix of advanced chemistry cell, as per the extant market conditions and the cells which are in commercial stage of production. On the drawing board, there are multiple more, but the cells which are in commercial state of production have been given to understand there are about almost 14 to 16 chemistries which fit into that. Now, for every chemistry, there's a varying degree of domestic value capture which can be achieved. There are chemistries where we are talking about as high as 100% also, because there are raw materials which are available in India. So, and also under the program, the government is giving a time period to phase out the capacity and the value addition, a time period of 5 years. So we expect this. Obviously, these things cannot happen overnight. So these things will happen in a phased-wise manner over a period of 5 years. The entire market synergies will evolve, domestic value addition will evolve, and hence the supply chains will be established. Yes, there will be certain import dependency in the initial years when the components value addition is lesser. We start from the mere assembly, but eventually the intention is to move towards greater value addition and a self-reliant India, as the government has coined the term.
Thanks, Aman. Any other comment on those questions from Akshama or Mani?
So when I first discussed this scheme with Aman, and I'll be very honest, I was very skeptical. I was like, will they be able to do the, value capture in India? Is it possible? But one thing is sure, and we've had enough stakeholder consultations to believe that when there's a challenge, innovation is not a problem in India. So I am sure that given, and as Aman said, it's not that it has to happen tomorrow. It's over a period of 5 years. So it's going to be interesting. We are all watching the space, but I think it will happen. It's just a bit of innovation which is required.
Thanks, Mani. timely question coming into the chat box. In terms of self-reliance, how are innovations being encouraged? What role does innovation play, Aman, in the overall design of the scheme?
Extremely imperative, extremely critical, and that is the reason two important provisions have been incorporated in the program. One is the bonus incentive being given to cells with higher performance specifications. So as in the eligibility matrix, as if everybody has seen out here, once you move towards cells with higher energy density or higher cycle life, the government gives you there's a provision for bonus on the base subsidy that has been bidded out. Second, so this is something which we expect will promote R&D, investment into R&D, emphasis to produce cells with higher performance specifications, market penetration of such cells. Now the second question is, what is the government doing to promote in-house domestic R&D? Because obviously the intention of the program is not to make India a global, just a mere assembler of cells. So there is a provision in the value capture also, where we are disincentivizing any company from paying royalties outside. Though the investments can be made in procurement of one-time IP, patents, so on and so forth. But in order to promote the domestic R&D, the value capture formula disincentivizes. When I say disincentivize, it's not a penal provision. All the government is saying that we won't give you an additional subsidy if you are bringing the technology from outside. That's all. Very simple, straightforward.
Terrific. Thanks, Aman. I also understand our distinguished panelist, Mani Khurana, has to step off to another meeting. So Mani, I just wanted to thank you on behalf of RMI and Niti for sharing some of your wisdom and perspective. And we look forward to hearing more from you soon in whatever forum allows us to do so. So thanks for joining.
Thank you for inviting me. Looking forward to many more such discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mani.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So another question coming in, Aman, perhaps this one for you, is about World Trade Organization compliance for the PLI scheme. Any comment on that? Or we can also
we've reviewed the WTO norms. This is a scheme to promote domestic manufacturing. Also, the government has taken all these factors well into consideration. There are, if in a contingency there's an event of default also, so the potential investors shall be compensated for it. That's all. So it's there in the public domain. It's there in the documents.
Good. Thank you. And another question, while we have you and you're subject to the firing squad of questions here, so thank you for your endurance. But there's a question about how and where the energy density and life table is used. As there's someone is pointing out, Hari NS has pointed out that the draft model bid document for the program in its current form doesn't seem to contain provisions for the bidder to specify cycle or energy density. Any comment on how and where energy density and life table is used?
So we don't need to specify the energy density and the cycle life. The concessionaire just has to bid the requisite amount of subsidy, which has to be below the reference rate. And in the due course of the 10-year subsidy window, while the production is on, the potential investor has the flexibility to manufacture any cell which is eligible under the ACC matrix.
Very good.
So you don't need to, nobody needs to freeze any particular technology, any particular density, cycle life during the upfront to the government. You have the flexibility. First 3 years, you manufacture X technology and then move to a higher technology. When I say higher performance specifications.
Thank you. Akshama, a question perhaps for you here. Question if there are any discussions ongoing about developing safety standards including looking at recycling and second use for batteries?
Yeah, thanks, Clay. I think a short answer to that is yes. We have the draft rules which have been drafted recently by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So they are going to kind of, define the safety, recycling and reuse of batteries. So as I understand, they are right now for public consultation and hopefully will be finalized soon. But going forward, we are also expecting, agencies like NITI, Ministry of Environment and Forests, to look beyond what will be there in the rules, given the very high penetration, hopefully, that we expect of batteries, both in EV, stationary storage, and for other applications. So we do expect, the whole life cycle value chain of batteries getting due attention, and recycling, reuse, kind of picking up in terms of policy frameworks and defining the requirements by manufacturers, by users, as far as ensuring safety, recycling and reuse are concerned.
Thank you, Akshma. So we're nearing the end of our time. And just before we close, I want to first thank Niti Aayog and Mr. Aman Hans for leadership on this program. I know that it was a consultative process, which it needed to be. And I think the patience and the persistence that you showed in consulting widely across industry, across government, across civil society to devise a program that from our perspective can be truly transformative and cross-cutting in its transformative nature in India is really noteworthy and praiseworthy. So thank you for the leadership, Aman. Thank you to our presenters, Mr. Jagabanta, Mr. Garrett, for sharing the market size and global and Indian perspectives that you did. And thanks very kindly to our panelists, Mani Khurana and Akshma Gate, for sharing their wisdom and insight as well. We've been recording this, and with permission, which we still need to seek, we'll be potentially posting it if people want to refer back to some of the information. We can also make the slide deck that was shared available for anyone who'd like to refer to those numbers. And certainly my contact and my colleague at RMI's contact is available on our website. So if anyone has questions or wishes to engage with us on the topic, we'd be more than happy to do so. Our intention is for this to be the first of a number of virtual forums on this topic. And so please stand by for future notification or announcement when we plan and convene the next one. With that, Dhanyavad to all. Thank you very much. Great morning and great day to all who've joined, and thank you for the meaningful conversation.
Thank you, Clay, for hosting this and being up so late.
No, it's no trouble at all. It's a great pleasure to stay up for conversations like this. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.